Hey, hello everybody and welcome to a brand new video. Today I wanted to talk about 5 RuneLite plugins that are extremely overpowered. Now as far as I'm aware, all of these plugins are still allowed to be used. However, that could change at any point. The amount of information on this is very little, so it's a little hard to say. And at the end of the video, I also wanted to talk about 3 plugins that are actually disabled by jagex just because they were too strong. So anyway, I hope you enjoy and let's get started. Coming in at number 1 is the Demonic Gorilla plugin. Now, I believe this was actually developed by wont, and for those who don't know, demonic gorillas are one of the few creatures in old school RuneScape that actually have overhead prayers, so you actually do need to prayer switch against them, as well as they have different attack styles. So it's not extremely hard to learn, but it does have a bit of a learning curve to it. However, what the Demonic Gorilla plugin does is actually put whatever the next prayer switch is going to be over its head, making it extremely easy to switch gear or switch your own overheads. Demonic Gorillas will attack with all 3 attack styles, and they will switch the attack style after they miss 3 times in a row, so it is totally possible to count this yourself, but the plugin does make it quite a bit easier. As for their own overhead prayers, they'll switch it after taking 50 damage, and that is a lot harder to track. I think the fact that you can count this yourself is the only reason that this plugin is still allowed. It's not taking any dynamic information or anything, it's just every 3 attacks, the attack style will change. However, it's extremely useful though, and probably just a technicality that it is still allowed to be used. Next up is the Entity Spawn Timer plugin, and this isn't actually in my version of RuneLite. I don't think it is banned, however I don't know if it's in the main version of RuneLite. You might have to add this yourself. What we do have in game is a timer for boss spawns, however that one is a lot less flexible. What the Entity Spawn Timer would do is you'd be able to mark a point on the floor, as well as put a timer to when that monster is going to respawn. I've seen people using that in Deadman mode because it's extremely useful at populated areas, so it would be definitely useful in more competitive scenarios, but just on the regular old school RuneScape servers, it would be extremely useful as well for populated spots like Brutal Black Dragons or Gargoyles or other things like that. You can mark exactly when that monster is going to respawn and at what location. I would argue this one is even more overpowered than the Demonic Gorilla plugin because counting the exact spawn time accurately is pretty hard to do without a machine or some sort of plugin helping you. It's not that hard to count 3 attacks that the Demonic Gorilla misses in a row. However, it's pretty challenging to count 17 seconds while you're dealing with other stuff and to have it done accurately. And maybe that is why it's not in the main version of RuneLite. Coming in at number 3 is the Clue Scroll Helper. Now this is one I use quite frequently, and I would have to say it's extremely overpowered. The amount of time it saves you from doing clues is tremendous. The plugin will literally tell you exactly what you have to do for your next step. It'll mark it on your map, it'll mark it on your screen. It will help you solve any puzzle boxes, any anagrams, any cryptic clues. There's even a separate plugin that helps you with the hot cold puzzles. So I get a lot of people, well, don't like quests and they don't really like solving clue scrolls, but most people like the rewards, so I understand why this plugin was made. However, this isn't that far off having a quest helper where it tells you exactly the items you need, exactly the location you need to go to, and it's just a bit of a slippery slope. Clue scrolls were meant to be, well, a treasure hunt essentially, and that entire feature of it is pretty much torn away when you use the Clue Scroll Helper. I'm not trying to shame anyone who uses it. I mean, I'm going to use it because it's super easy and saves you so much time, but it's a little sad thinking about all the fun memories you may have had, and now someone tells you exactly what to do. Next up, we have the Kourend library plugin. I mentioned this a bit in my last video, but I've used it even more since, and it is extremely overpowered. This is directly solving something that would normally not be possible for most people. So a little while ago, there was actually a pattern discovered when you're doing the Arceus library minigame, I guess I'm going to call it, in that there are certain relations between books that you find and where the next book is going to be. And there was a very in-depth Reddit post on it a while ago. So anyway, I believe this Kourend library plugin is based off of that. So as you complete more parts of the Kourend library, as you turn in more books, more dark tomes, it eliminates potential places you need to search, essentially cutting the time in half, if not into a quarter of what it would normally take to complete your tasks. So you might say that, well, okay, it's a little overpowered. It's only really necessary for when you are getting your Kourend favor, which in this case is only going to take a couple hours. However, that's not even the case. You can actually get pretty quick rune crafting and magic experience from just finding these dark tomes. Maybe it's not worth it for magic, however, rune crafting is actually a somewhat viable method of getting rune crafting experience. And I think this method was originally discovered during the King of the Skill competition, well, I guess that's almost a year ago now. Most RuneLite plugins are just kind of quality of life differences. However, this one I'm not so sure of, and maybe this one should not even be allowed. Compared to everything else, the amount of time this saves is incredible. And last up, coming in at number 5 is the Raids Scouter plugin. Now this one is extremely overpowered if you're doing Chambers of Xeric. I don't think jagex allowed any plugins made for the Theater of Blood, and probably for good reason. Essentially what the Raid Scouter plugin does is it shows you a quick roadmap of what the raid is going to look like. It's going to quickly show you a layout of the dungeon and exactly which monsters you're going to need to fight along the way. This gives you a direct and massive advantage over somebody not using it. It's gotten to the point where I'm pretty sure anyone who does raiding seriously has this plugin on one client or another. It's not a small thing to make your life easier, it's directly giving you information that other people will not have, which really makes it pretty overpowered. So there are 5 plugins that, as far as I'm aware, are still allowed by jagex but are extremely overpowered. Last up here, I just want to talk about 3 plugins I found that were actually banned by jagex. RuneLite has removed quite a few of their plugins, but a lot of it via their own free will. However, these 3 plugins were actually removed by jagex. Now these were removed about 8 months ago. The first one is the Zulrah Helper, which coincidentally is actually the name of a Zulrah bot too, I believe. Essentially what it would do is put the markings of where you need to stand, what attack style you're going to need to pray, and what phase of the Zulrah was going to be on. Definitely extremely overpowered, not that much above just a demonic gorilla plugin, but it was making things extremely easy. Although probably not that much further than just the regular ZulrahGuide.com, even though that doesn't exist anymore. The next one was an AoE plugin. It would show you where AoE attacks would damage you on the ground, like Vorcast Fireball and the Falling Rocks in the Gargoyle boss. Considering how hard they are to see, this would make things so much easier. However, since jagex has not made an attempt to make these AoE damaging abilities more visible and easier to dodge, this does give you a huge advantage over someone not using it, so I understand why they removed it. And last up here is the dynamic spawning feature of the Impling Tracker plugin. There still is a Impling Tracker plugin in RuneLite, however it used to dynamically track where the Implings spawned, and now it just gives you static spawn points. And there were a few other things removed, but those are the major ones. Anyway guys, that is about it. What do you think about these plugins? Are they extremely overpowered, or are they just more of the same? Leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to leave it a like, and I will see you next time.